Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Dropkick Radio Wrestling Show, right here at dropkickradio.com. We are honoured today to be joined by a very special guest. He has wrestled all over the world. He has held many a heavyweight championship. He's also wrestled in the UK on many occasions. I am joined by the one and only Vader. Good sir, welcome to the Dropkick Radio Wrestling Show.
Thank you very much, Jeremy.
To begin with, we would like to go back to your time in the AWA. You started your career in the AWA in the mid-80s, where you competed under the names of Baby Bull and Bull Power. With this in mind, we wanted to know who was it that came up with those particular names for you?
Those were nicknames from my college football days. A gentleman by the name of Doug Payton. He was, when I was a freshman, he was a senior. And he was the one who nicknamed me. He was a senior All-American who went on to play several years in the NFL and also Canadian football. So.
And were you a big player of football yourself in college?
Yes, sir. I was an all-conference performer, an All-American performer, and was drafted to the Los Angeles Rams. In my rookie year, the team went to a Super Bowl, and I'm the proud owner of a Super Bowl ring. So.
Wow, excellent. And I suppose from there, what led you to go into pro wrestling then?
Well, as a fresh football player, I ruptured a patellar tendon and potentially a career-ending injury. And Dr. Robert Curlin, who was a very famous orthopedic surgeon for the Los Angeles Rams, the Lakers, the Kings, movie stars. He operated on me, and his reputation was well deserved. The tendon has held up. Although my football career was ended, they felt it was a very risky proposition and a very serious injury. Obviously, I moved on to professional wrestling, and the knee has held up for many years. So. I guess it was a pretty good surgery.
Looking back then, had the knee injury had not occurred, was it your intention to have a very long and prosperous football career then?
I'd have to honestly answer yes. That was my intent from a little kid. Although I watched wrestling and was a big fan. I was a high school All-American and a college football All-American, and drafted to the Los Angeles Rams. I was following a dream career. I mean, you have to understand that I grew up in Los Angeles and was drafted back to the Los Angeles Rams. So that was a big moment in time for me. And I had I not been injured and experienced the injury that I did, the experience, it was a sweep against the Dallas Cowboys, and I don't know how familiar you are with football, but we were running a sweep right, and a large collision with one of the defensive players, and the knee virtually exploded. And, it was several years before I was really able to walk again. And so the window of opportunity for me as a football player was over, and as I got well and was back in the gym, the concept of being a professional wrestler and going down to Minnesota and entering Brad Riggins' wrestling school or academy, that all became clear to me.
Very early on in your time in AWA, you got a huge opportunity wrestling against Stan Hansen for the AWA World title. Obviously, as I mentioned, a huge opportunity to you, but in looking back at that time, do you feel you were ready for that opportunity?
No. I think I'd been in a ring just a couple of months, 2, 3, maybe 4 months, and Stan had already had established himself as a great performer in Japan and in the AWA. So no, I wasn't ready for it. But like you said, it was an opportunity, and And I certainly, I can honestly say I learned from it, and I believe getting beat up as bad as I did by him in that match, I learned some valuable lessons.
Following your time in the AWA, you then headed out east to Japan, where you were originally signed to wrestle for All Japan Pro Wrestling. But then Giant Baba traded your contract to then go to New Japan Pro Wrestling. Looking back, do you know the reasons for this, and how do you think this affected your career overall?
Well, actually, it was Vern Gagne and Big Otto Vance from the CWA, the Catch Wrestling Association of Europe, which was the largest professional wrestling association in Europe at that time, if my understanding is correct. Vern Gagne, Big Otto Vance was looking for some young talent, and he liked big guys that could move, and Vern Gagne and Big Otto Vance had made a deal, and the next thing I knew, I was on a plane to Europe, and I had left at the AWA and went over to Europe, and I liked it so much I stayed 2 years and brought my wife and my young baby son over to Europe with me, and we had a great 2 years over there, and enjoyed it very much.
When you did actually then leave the CWA, were you upset to have to go, or was it purely just business for you?
No, it was a step up. The CWA was a great opportunity. I became CWA World Champion on 3 different occasions in those two years, and the style of wrestling was unusual. We wrestled rounds, and unusual for me, having been trained by Bad Riggins in America. And at that point, I was in contact with Stan. I had developed a friendship with Mr. Stan Hansen and a gentleman by the name of Nick Bockwinkel from AWA. And Nick and I, when I went to Europe, had kept in contact, and he had promoted me to Giant Baba. And then when my tour was over, after the second year from CWA is when I was headed over for Giant Baba in Japan, and that's where the trade took place between Inoki and Giant Baba.
Were you happy to go to New Japan, or would you have preferred to have worked in All Japan at that time?
No, I think the opportunity for me was New Japan, and looking back, had I went to All Japan and Giant Baba, you have to look at the number of big name stars over there. I mean, the Funk Brothers and Stan Hansen and Harley Race and Jimmy Snuka and Bruiser Brody, Steve Williams, Terry Gordy. There was I would have been one in the crowd. And it would have been very hard as a young wrestler to break through that kind of talent. Where Inoki, he had a plan and an agenda with the Vader character, and it's my understanding I wasn't the first choice for the Vader character. That the Ultimate Warrior and even Sid Vicious were possible choices for that character before me. So the opportunity to go to New Japan and try to develop this character was a huge opportunity, a great break for me.
Obviously, the character that you are referring to is Big Van Vader, a name which is synonymous throughout pro wrestling, given the many great matches you had. With this moniker being given to you, did you plan to keep it for the rest of your career, or did it just work out that way?
Inoki, I'm trying to remember exactly what happened, but when I was working for Inoki, I had obtained the legal rights to the name from New Japan and was working on my time off from New Japan at the WCW with Dusty Rhodes as the booker. And that's how the relationship with the WCW was developed.
When you began your time in New Japan, you started off with a big bang, to say the least. When you debuted, you challenged and subsequently defeated Antonio Inoki after he had already had a very hard-fought contest against Riki Choshu. This occurrence actually resulted in the very pro-Inoki crowd at the Sumo Hall venue to cause a riot and get New Japan barred from the venue for a large amount of time. What are your memories of that event and all the occurrences that happened?
Well, I had came to Japan, and again, the conversation between Inoki and Giant Baba or their subordinates, I mean, there was a lot of people working for New Japan, there was a lot of people working for All Japan at that time. But let's just say the two companies had agreed that my services would be rendered to Inoki and New Japan. I was scheduled to fight Tatsumi Fujinami at the Tokyo Dome in what I believe was going to be the semi-main event, and introduce that was December of 1987, and that's where the character was going to be introduced, with the smoke and the eyes and in all of its glory. And Fujinami refused to fight me. And again, I have no idea to this day. I have no idea why he did. But Inoki, having finished his match, realizing that this, giant sold-out Sumo Palace, needed to get their money's worth, and certainly the advertised card, so he virtually just stayed in the ring and called me out. And it was my initial contact with New Japan was a gentleman by the name of Masa Saito, who had been working in the AWA. And, a half hour earlier, he said, "Leon, get dressed, get your clothes on, take a shower, have a beer, and relax, but I guess you're not going to fight." And of course, I asked him why, and he said he didn't know, but that was the course of the evening. And so I think I had responded to his request, and then I took a shower and had 2 or 3 beers at that time. And when he came running back into the dressing room and saying, get dressed, you have to fight. Inoki's going to fight you. And, as I say, I guess the rest is history.
Obviously, a very big incident when the fans did start to riot. How was this all seen by those backstage, if you don't mind me asking? Was it an error of judgment when they looked back on it, or were they pleased with the amount of emotion that they were able to invoke from the fans?
Obviously, they were pleased. There was the type of publicity that, the surprise move of Fujinami and then the subsequent surprise move from Inoki, and the fans' reaction, and it got a lot of press at the time, and it was exactly what they were looking for, although it wasn't planned. And at least I don't think it was planned. I don't think they were that good, although they were extremely skilled promoters, and the number of people coming to see New Japan Pro Wrestling during that time was just, in the thousands every night. It was just a madhouse. And, again, I don't think they had planned that out. So that was certainly just something they wanted.
Moving forward in your time in New Japan, you captured the IWGP Heavyweight title following it being vacated in an 8-man tournament. What were your thoughts on that particular night, and what were your feelings on actually being given the chance to represent the company as the champion?
Well, the night itself was it was a Tokyo Dome show, and a large number of people in the high 60s or early 70,000. I mean, we're talking about 70,000 people watching a wrestling match, and I actually had 3 matches that night, and it was. Trying to remember, Fujinami was one, Chono was the other, and Hashimoto was the third for the final match and the title. Was, very young, in good shape, obviously, to fight 3 times one night, fighting like, I believe it was 66 minutes, total of all 3 matches. So, a big night, but, it was a huge responsibility. Again, the crowds were huge every night. I mean, it was just a madhouse, and, you certainly had to be on your game, so.
You've mentioned a couple of times the Tokyo Dome. Obviously, as you've just said, it's a huge venue with the amount of people it can hold. What was it like for you actually walking out into the Tokyo Dome with all of those people there?
Yeah, that was a feeling. I mean, I had played football in front of large crowds, but obviously I had never wrestled in front of that many people. And the Super Bowl that I played in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl, there was, just over 100,000 people for that game. And so, obviously I was used to, performing in front of that many people, but this wasn't me being part of a team. It was just me. I was the team, and it was me against another opponent. It could take your breath away, certainly. When you walk out in front of that many people, it's just, wow. I mean, is this really happening? It was a very surreal feeling. And then, obviously after the first contact, that all goes away very quickly.
Your reign was very historic in New Japan Pro Wrestling, despite being quite short, as you were the first champion to lose the title in a match, as the previous 3 champions had actually vacated the title. To your knowledge, was there any particular reason why your first reign was so short?
No, I couldn't tell you. Obviously, those type of decisions were being made, without any discussion with me. So I really couldn't comment.
You regained the title in August following losing it in May, and your second run lasted for just over a year as IWGP champion. With that in mind, I would like to ask, on a personal level for yourself, which reign as the champion gave you the biggest sense of accomplishment?
Really they all did. I mean, having lost the title the first time in just, a very short period of time, business, wrestling is all about the business. It's all about, getting the job done, so whatever it takes, and certainly providing for your family and doing the very best you can for the people that have bought tickets. So, I took them all serious. So, I really couldn't say that one was more important than the other.
During your second reign as IWGP champion, you also captured the CWA title in Austria, the promotion that we were speaking about earlier. And by the end of 1989, you had also won the UWA heavyweight title in Mexico as well. With so much success in that year alone, retrospectively, do you think you handled the pressure that was put upon you well?
Well, I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but every place I go, the people I did business with, or every place I went during that year, and being more specific as to answer your question, that everyone was satisfied. We did good business. The box office was, we were selling out in Mexico, and in fact, this is what Carlos Maynes told me, who was the promoter and owner of the UWA. He said that Andre the Giant had held the record for a 1-week stretch in Mexico where, attendance record. And he said that after my week as champion in the UWA, that I had broken that attendance record. And, that was a milestone in my career that, I don't think no one's really aware of, but that was something that, again, the promoter told me. So, yeah, I think, having said that, if the matches are good and the fans are satisfied and the box office is I guess sold out. I would say I handled it very well then.
Obviously, with you travelling around the world, basically, it's a lot of travelling involved. How did you cope with the travel, if you don't mind me asking?
Just, I think very early in my career, because of my size and my ability to negotiate a first-class seat, that certainly was helpful. But aside from that, I mean, being away from the family was a big thing. But working in Japan, we call them tours, and you go over for a 2-week tour or a 3-week tour and a 4-week tour, and then there was substantial time between each tour, so you did get breaks. It wasn't like wrestling in the WWE where it's virtually nonstop. At least it was back then.
So, I guess, kind of jumping forward slightly then, do you prefer the tour system that they have in Japan, or are you more favourable to the non-stop that the WWE has?
No, if I had to do all over again, I would have, before leaving the WCW, I would have sat down with Inoki and tried to structure a long-term deal, a 10, 12-year contract for, obviously as many dollars as I could get, but limiting the amount of tours in weeks. So, you could have an semblance of a life back home with your family, and then also, being a large man, giving the body time to recoup and trying to save your joints for the future, elbows and knees and backs. So, I think I could have been more productive and had a longer career. Had I had that type of foresight, but it was kind of a whirlwind at that time for me.
As we head into the 1990s discussion with you now, obviously moving in towards WCW time, one notable thing we would like to ask you about is your quite famous match, to say the least, with Stan Hansen, which was a New Japan v All Japan match. The very standout moment of the match being that your eyeball came out of its socket whilst trading some very stiff shots by the look of it. The question we would just really like to ask you is, what was going through your mind when that happened, and how easy was the decision to continue the match for you?
Well, it never crossed my mind not to. A lot of people have said, "Well, you're crazy. You should have stepped out of the ring, or took your mask off and showed the fans, and stopped the match and had a rematch." But again, it really never crossed my mind to. When I was approaching the ring, Stan had entered the ring first, and why he went in the ring first and I came out last, again, I don't know. It just happened that way. But when I was entering the ring, he took his cowbell and swung over the top of the rope and hit me in the forehead with it, and it busted my nose. So when I entered the ring, I left the mask outside. I entered the ring and hit him upside his head, and that created that exchange, which resulted in Stan thumbing me in the eye, and that injury, that cost me 3 separate surgeries, two to the eye and 1 to the nose. So, I don't really think that the thumb was necessary. I mean, we were fighting, toe to toe, and when that happened, it was just a violent shot, and looking back on the match and wrestling after the injury, my eye literally came out of the socket, and I had to shove it back in. It was actually hanging out of the socket on my eye, and it just everything happened so quickly. It popped out. I shoved it back in and kept fighting. So.
Wow, is really all I can say to that. And I suppose then, in reference to, you mentioned that you had a few surgeries on the eye. Is that perhaps the most serious injury you've had in your career? Yeah,
probably, because I lost a great deal of eyesight in the right eye, and having two pretty serious surgeries on it to maintain the vision and the stability and structure of the eye. And then, of course, I had to rebuild my nose. Had to be rebuilt entirely. It was just shattered. So, you know, a lot of time off work. It was very, you know, it was very costly to me because there was a great deal of time off when you weren't in the ring anymore. So, you know, it actually, although the fight itself, you know, I earned pretty good money, it actually ended up costing me money because of the injuries.
I do actually remember there was, I believe it was a tag team title match with Bam Bam Bigelow as your partner against Hasein Muto. You captured the IWGP tag team titles in 1992, and then, if I remember correctly, a short time later you had a match with Keiji Muto where you actually suffered a knee injury during that match, and I vaguely recall you having to be off for a fairly long period of time. How badly do you think that injury affected your career in the long run?
Well, which question first? The first one referred to a tag team with Bam Bam?
Yes, sorry. What was it like teaming with Bam Bam Bigelow for you?
You know what, Bam Bam, wow, I mean, what a talent. Jesus. He was just extraordinary. You know, we often talked about, you know, him getting into gym and actually, you know, lifting weights and getting serious about his training. I mean, because he was an incredible talent, and it was natural. Because I mean, there was, you know, in other words, he spent very little time, you know, on his cardiovascular training or his weight training. He was just naturally this huge monster that could move like he moved. I would sit back and just watch him and go, wow, he really was something else. He was just a big, talented man. And we tag teamed for quite a while together. So, you know, tagging with Bam Bam was a pleasure because the matches were always good. It was just real pleasure, you know, working with him. You know, occasionally we would butt heads about who would do this and who would do that. But looking back on that now, I mean, those are natural things, I believe, that happen between two competitive individuals. So, you know, we're always vying for the top spot. So, but, you know, I've looking back, I always enjoyed Bam Bam's matches. You know, a great deal.
And was there ever perhaps an sorry, carry on.
No, please, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask, was there ever perhaps an opportunity looking to arise for you to team together in America?
You know what? It never came about. I just, you know, why it didn't. I mean, wow. No, I know in America there are the people that, you know, and specifically wrestlers that were in a position to influence those type of decisions. I mean, why would they want that? Because that would have been two 400-pound men in the ring that, you know, both could drop kick and open, and you know, it would have been hard to compete with, is what I'm trying to say.
And as I was referring to a few minutes ago, you had a match later in 1992 with Keiji Muto where you actually suffered a quite bad knee injury. Looking back, how badly do you think this injury affected your career in the long term?
I think more than any one injury in itself, with the accumulation of injuries. And, you know, I've had 44 surgeries to date, and between you know, American football and professional wrestling, and you know, the eye, the shoulder, the wrist. Not all of them major surgeries like, you know, back surgery or shoulder surgery, but of the 44 surgeries that I've had, you know, I'd say half of them, you know, 20, 21, 22 of them were serious surgeries, you know, like the eye, you know, like the knee, you know, like the shoulder, and then the other were you know, I guess you couldn't call it a wrist surgery or an elbow surgery or, you know, nerve surgery. So, more than any one injury to say that the knee or I was just have to a cumulative effect. So.
Moving forward to 92 and 93, one of the standout feuds you were involved with was actually with Sting. What were your memories of working with Sting?
Probably, probably the finest athlete I've ever worked with. I mean, certainly Bam Bam Bigelow was a great athlete for his size, and Keiji Muto was a great athlete. But Sting had a rhythm and a timing about him that, I guess it was, at 200, probably in his prime, 55, 60 pounds, was, able to move. He reminded me of a large antelope. So, he was very, very willing and very eager to try things and experiment. And, we had some very, very good matches, for that day and that time and that era. So, just, and really an extraordinary gentleman.
One of the matches that you had with Sting actually took place here in London, England, where you actually lost the WCW title to him before regaining it a few days later in Dublin, Ireland. First of all, did you enjoy working in the UK with WCW, and what were your thoughts on that actual particular title switch?
The UK, I have some very fond memories of working in the UK. I love the excitement and the sheer energy from the crowd. They certainly were educated fans, and the hospitality of the local promoters and etc. So it was always a good time coming over to the UK. And as far as the Ireland, Dublin, I remember it being St. Pat's Day and having a background. That was, being able to spend St. Pat's Day in Dublin was exciting. I'd be honest with you, I don't remember a whole lot about the match. So I remember winning the title there, but I mean specifically, like when we talked about Stan Hansen or other matches, but it's difficult for me at this time to specifically recall on that match, so I apologize.
That's absolutely fine. You mentioned about the fans over here being somewhat more educated. How else would you say that a British crowd differs from the American fans that you're used to performing in front of?
Well, again, certainly more educated, and I think for me as an American bad guy, the big ugly guy with the mask on and the barrel chest and the big belly. I spent, over 20 years of my wrestling career, at 400 pounds plus, and certainly that's taken its toll. But that created with the British fans that when you're working with the Sting, looking like he looks, and a Davey Boy. And looking the way Davey Boy looked, he was tan, he was fit, and so that reaction from the fans was particularly enjoyable. I mean, if you did the right thing at the right time, they would respond, and in a real big way. So I think that's what I'm on to. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. Is that as a performer, to be able to get in front of that type of fan that is educated and was very, very pleasing, very pleasurable.
Are there any particular stories from all of your times visiting the UK that stand out to you that you can share with us?
Well, obviously, we just left the UK. It wasn't into the borders of the UK, but it went into, I guess, Ireland, and It was Sid Vicious and Arn Anderson. You remember that tale?
Yes. Was this involving the scissors?
Yeah, the scissors. And I remember we had just arrived, and just an excruciatingly long bus ride. I mean, it was a flight over, and long flight over. You know, obviously it was a long week, and then we all met up, and we all flew over to the UK. Got off the plane and went directly to the match and had a match, and then got on a bus and had this another very, very long drive, and arrived at a hotel, and obviously there was very little patience, and obviously I'm not going to get into specifics, but I remember Sid walking toward me, and he had a hole in his stomach, and there was, blood pouring out of it, like just like a water faucet was turned on just a little bit. And I grabbed Sid, and I sat on the chair, and I stuck my thumb in that hole and told him not to move until the ambulance arrived.
Wow.
So, that's a memorable moment, I guess.
Looking forward once again at your time in WCW, throughout 93 and 94, you had a very memorable feud with Mick Foley, who was known as Cactus Jack at the time. Looking back, it was quite violent, and it actually resulted in some very real injuries, including Foley's nose being broken, there was a large gash on his face, and then later on there was the incident that resulted in Foley's ear being ripped off. For you, what was it like working with Mick Foley in this program, and looking back at the entire feud, how do you feel about it?
Well, I always called him Cactus Jack, or Jack, so, I don't know if people know this, but well, I'm sure they do now. He's wrote, several books now at this point. He's a very intelligent man. I apologize, excuse me. A lot of these crazy stunts that he would come up with, would include, getting his ear ripped off and his nose broken, things like that. So, I kind of, I have to say that I got a bad rap, maybe unnecessarily so, during that period, fighting with him and getting in the ring with him, but. Obviously it was pleasurable. We had great matches. I don't. I remember having great matches throughout my career with, again, like with Bam Bam and going back to the AWA and CWA in Japan. As we have this discussion, the matches that I had with various individuals in those various countries were memorable matches. So certainly Cactus Jack was, the matches I had with him would be up on that level.
At a Starrcade in 1994, you were meant to take on Sid Vicious for the title, but he actually got fired, and instead you ended up facing Ric Flair in the ring. Looking back, would you have preferred to have gone against Sid, or were you happy with Flair being the replacement?
Well, Flair, he's had a great career, and he's extraordinary performer. So, obviously when he came back from the WWE into the WCW, he I'm saying he carried a lot of influence with him. So, I certainly enjoyed fighting with Rick, and again, that match that we had was excellent, and one for the books. The unfortunate thing is I ended up losing. So, maybe I would have preferred wrestling someone else because I lost. Lost the world title, and that whole atmosphere. But that's history now, as they say.
Throughout 1995, you were involved with working with the Dungeon of Doom, trying to take down Hulk Hogan. How was this period of time for you?
During that period with Hulk, I had a very serious shoulder surgery, and I remember going to Mr. Bischoff and telling him that I was in great deal of pain and was having to take a great deal of pain medication, everything prescribed, but still it takes its toll, and that it was affecting my ability to perform, and I was worried about the amount of pain medication I was taking, and that I needed to go home and take care of the injury, and actually ended up having surgery on the shoulder. It was pretty well messed up. It was a very serious, extensive surgery, and I remember, just obviously Eric was Mr. Bischoff was under a lot of pressure, and I wasn't allowed the time to go home. So during that period, it was my memory is hazed because I was taking a lot of pain medication, and so I'd have to say it was a very stressful time for me.
You mentioned Mr. Bischoff there. How was he as a person? I mean, you've mentioned that he unfortunately didn't allow you to have the time off to recover properly. But aside from that, how were your dealings with Eric Bischoff?
I thought he was a very talented man. Very, very pleasant to be around. I just, the circumstance. He was in a situation where, he was trying to get ratings and do his job, and certainly, I was trying to look after my best interests and take care of my body, which is, my ability to feed my family, and that whole concept. But Eric is a gentleman, and I have nothing negative to say about him. It's just it was an unfortunate situation.
In reference to the Dungeon of Doom trying to take down Hulk Hogan, in reference to that feud, you were meant to join with Hogan, Savage, and a longtime rival Sting to take on that particular faction at the War Games. But unfortunately, due to a situation which we won't go into now, you were released from WCW. My question in reference to this is, would you have liked to have been able to finish that feud? And can you recall what the planned direction for the remainder of that feud was?
I really can't remember, and I don't think I had been told. So I had never, there was nothing conveyed to me about where that was headed. But again, during that period of time, I was working with an injury that needed to be surgically repaired, and I believe that the pain and the pain medication got the better of me. And things that I said and did certainly caused the whole, it put a lot of pressure on the situation. So I wasn't myself, and unfortunately, like you said, I was released, and looking back, my behavior under the circumstances wasn't proper. So, and it one thing led to another, and that was that was a job you really didn't want to leave at that time. It was WCW was on its way up, and it's looking back on that. That's one of the great regrets I have, about my career.
It was also around this time, whilst in WCW, you actually got the chance to star as part of the television series Boy Meets World.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind me asking, how did this opportunity come about for you?
I don't know. I believe, again, I remember Eric Bischoff saying, "Leon, would you be interested? Because there's some people that are interested in you and your character." And I said, "Sure, why not?" you know, if anything, it would have been a few days off of that grueling schedule, you know. So, you're going to Hollywood and getting in a jacuzzi and doing a little acting certainly was preferable to, you know, staying on the road and that grind and things. So it was a change in pace.
And did you enjoy the experience overall?
Yeah, very much so. You know, I don't think I had any real talent at it, but it was fun.
Was acting something you perhaps had a desire to go into later on, or was this literally just a one-time deal?
Yeah, pretty much a one-time deal. I did a movie where I was obviously the bad guy. I was the strong arm for the negative element in the show. It was called The Fist of North Star. It was a post-apocalyptic setting where, you know, obviously everybody had blown everybody up, and, you know, the evil was taking over the good, and I was part of the evil, and I enjoyed that. But it actually went into the theaters in Japan, and then it went straight to video in America. But that was kind of fun.
And looking back at Fist of the North Star, did you actually watch the film? What were your impressions of it?
You know, I have a copy of it somewhere. Yeah, I did watch it. The movie itself was, you know, it was a sci-fi thriller, so it never stood a chance of winning any awards. But again, it was a lot of fun doing. It was an action sci-fi. So being big and strong and being, you know, I remember one scene where I took the good guy and they were rigging up these cables and stuff in order to hold him in the air, and I said, you know, what do you do? And I said, well, I just pick him up and hold him. It's, you know, it's only like a minute I have to hold him there. So I just picked him up and held him, and you know, I guess it saved like 8 hours of setup and all that stuff. So they were pretty happy with me.
Looking forward to 1996, you debuted in the World Wrestling Federation. What was your opinion of that particular company?
You know, Vince McMahon, I mean, of all the great promoters, you know, with Baba and Noki and Mizawa and Otto Vance and Carlos Minas, and I mean, obviously Vince McMahon is just extremely talented, very, very intelligent man. You know, my time in the WWE, again, we have talked earlier about, you know, the knee surgeries that I had, and the timing of me going to the WWE, obviously being released from the WCW, and then actually being beat up and, you know, in the condition I was in. When my first match in the WWE, I needed the shoulder surgery that I was talking about, that I was working during that time period where I believe you phrased the question with Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff in that period. So my agreement with Vince was that I would enter the WWE injured and then do the best I could for a while and then go have the surgery and then come back. And that turned out to be, you know, the very, very worst decision I ever made, because even, you know, the injury was extremely painful, but when I got to the WWE, I was still very strong. I mean, again, the shoulder was excruciating, but, you know, I came in being the athlete that I had always been in my career, and we'd worked a couple of weeks, and he said, well, this is a good time for you to go have your surgery, go have it. And I had the surgery, and the agreement was I would have 6 months off to rehabilitate from the surgery, and that turned into about 80 days. So having that rehabilitation time cut, you know, more than half, it just was impossible. When I came back from the surgery, I literally couldn't do a push-up, and was getting in the ring and being asked to perform, and I just couldn't do it. So, you know, I became very just not productive as a wrestler. And I think my time in the WWE, paled in comparison to other, my time with other companies and throughout my career.
As a thought, in reference to how Vader was portrayed in the World Wrestling Federation, do you think there may have perhaps been a little trouble understanding your character, which is why they never seemed to use you as well as you had been in previous companies?
No, I think it was just my inability to perform as Vader had in the past. Their expectations, the character they hired was the character that was drop kicking and moonsaulting and being able to wrestle for 25 and 30 minutes a match. And after the surgery, I wasn't that character anymore. And again, I wasn't given the time that we had negotiated for. I had talked to the surgeon, and he said, "You're going to need at least 6 months. This is, you've let the shoulder go so long during that period in WCW. You're going to need this time to get your strength back and get the shoulder right." And, I don't think it had anything to do with anything other than the fact that I wasn't allowed the time to get well. And I literally couldn't do a push-up. I couldn't raise my hand over my head. And, I was out there performing with one arm. So, again, the character that they thought they were hiring was unable to perform. So it created a negative atmosphere about the character. And again, I think the time in the WWE, pretty much paled by comparison. Although there were moments, but nothing like the time in Japan or the WCW.
Whilst in the WWE, you had feuds with Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, the Hart Foundation, amongst others. What would you say stood out as your best time in the company?
I can't answer that question. Again, I have to go back to my previous statements. I really never got on track. I never. Again, that we've talked about the grueling schedule. I had some memorable matches with Shawn. Shawn, again, he is another athlete like a Muta, like a Sting. I mean, Shawn could do anything. He was again very much like a Sting. So I think those were probably my best matches. Was with Shawn.
Following your time in the WWF, you returned to Japan, finally getting an opportunity to work with All Japan, where you found success by winning titles, including the Triple Crown in 1999. You had now held both the big titles in New Japan and All Japan. You spoke earlier how you treated every reign as champion the same and you always gave your best. Did it mean any more to you, perhaps, to have now won the Triple Crown for All Japan?
You know what? I have to go back to my physicality. When I left the WWE, and this is something that's bothered me for a long time. It was reported that I was let go from the WWE, and that isn't the case. I went to Mr. McMahon and told him that I had an opportunity to go back to Japan, and even though there was time left in my contract, that I wanted out of it. And we had agreed to that, and he said, well, I'd like you to finish up approximately 3 weeks through this calendar date, and there was a handshake agreement, and then at that time, I had then the time to go home and rehabilitate, to get back in the gym and rehabilitate, and where I wasn't in, where I wasn't in the excruciating pain. And when I went back to All Japan and then subsequently Noah after that, the character became strong and active again, like I had always been. So, when you talk about the Triple Crown, it it's again, pro wrestling isn't like the NFL where, if you got a hangnail in the NFL, in other words, if you're injured, you're, with the legal representation you have as a football player and the doctors and the trainers, they're certainly going to give you time to heal up, and that necessarily isn't the case in wrestling. And I'm not trying to paint wrestling in a bad picture. I'm just saying it's the nature of the game. You need to keep yourself well. That's part of the deal. So again, when I went back to Japan, obviously before I went back to Japan, I was able to go home and again rehabilitate. So
during your time in All Japan, you had the opportunity to work with the late great Mitsuharu Misawa. We would just simply like to ask, what are your memories of working with him?
He again, we had some great matches, some long, good matches. I think his greatest asset was as a promoter. Certainly, he had in the ring with myself and a gentleman by the name of Jun Akiyama and Kobayashi. He was a great performer, but as great as a performer as he was, I believe he was just a very intelligent promoter. When he decided to leave Baba, obviously he had some financial backing, but what a risk he took, and a very gutsy move as a businessman. And I remember him telling me that he wanted me to come with him, and that those initial matches was with Misawa and myself, or myself and Nakayama, or myself and Kobayashi, and those Misawa, Kobayashi, Nakayama, and myself, we kind of were doing a round robin, and we're establishing the company, and our loyal following. So when you talk about Misawa again, he was very, very intelligent, as a businessman, very shrewd.
And do you think that's how Misawa should be remembered?
Well, that's just my opinion. He was a gentleman. He was a kind soul. Very understanding. I remember some of the younger wrestlers would come to me and say, Leon, we're not coming to you asking for more money or more weeks or more dates. It's just when we are booked, it's, we might have the opportunity to work elsewhere in America, but we tell them no because we don't know if we're coming and working for him. So I was trying to sort that out for him. And very, very understanding. He just was a gentleman. And he never once raised his voice in my presence the whole time we worked together. So he's just a very impressive individual. And, a kind soul. It was a real pleasure to work for him.
And of course, you mentioned the breakaway from All Japan to form Pro Wrestling Noah. As you said, it was a very big risk, but in hindsight, were you surprised with how well Noah took off?
Misawa had approached me and told me that this is what he was going to do and wanted to know if I was interested. And, so, no, I guess I wasn't surprised because I took that risk along with Misawa, So, obviously I was pretty impressed with him. He was virtually running the company, All Japan for years, prior to the move. So. And again, I'm not, Giant Baba was great to me, and he's a great individual, but it was, I think it came down to control, who was gonna, I don't know, I don't think it was about money, it was just about Misawa being able to do things a certain way, with Baba was getting sick, and then there was Mrs. Baba. So that whole triangle, I think, was the ultimate decision for Misawa to do what he did.
And obviously, Pro Wrestling Noah is currently in a rebuilding phase at the moment, following what happened last year with Mitsuharu Misawa. Do you keep up to date with what's going on in Noah, and how do you see them faring over the next few years?
You know, I can't answer that question. I don't keep up, and you know, I wish them the very best, and you know, just there's some very dear friends of mine that are still working and involved for that company, and anything I could do to help them, I certainly would be willing to do that. So I just have high hopes for them and their restructuring. You know, it's rare that a company could rebound for that type of loss. Again, Misawa was such a gentleman and such a talent both in the ring and as a promoter. I mean, that's, you know, in a very pivotal point in the WWE's existence. If you would, you know, lose a Vince McMahon, I mean, how could you rebound from that? I mean, Vince McMahon is he's just talented, isn't he? Both as a performer and as a promoter. So it's going to be very difficult to rebound, but I wish him well.
Following your time in Pro Wrestling Noah, your career slowed down, but you did make a quick run in TNA, starting a feud with Nikita Koloff. What were your opinions of TNA at the time?
You know what? A very creative group. I'm friends with Terry Taylor, and that was a very pleasurable time for me. It was a very short time, but I enjoyed it. And again, you know, the cumulative effect of injuries, I needed to take some time off, which I have. I've had some corrective surgeries on the knees, and I've created a partnership with a company called ADK, which is a marketing advertising firm, very large one, very successful one. And I've attained a sponsorship and created Vader Time Promotions, and we've been promoting shows for, you know, a couple of years now. And, I had my return to the ring April 29th, and I performed with Twofold Scorpio, my longtime partner. And, you know, by the way, what a talent he is. He really is a very talented individual, physically talented and able to perform at a very, very high level. And I introduced my son to Vader Time Promotions, and Jesse he's always my son, what can I say, but he was the high school All-American. He received a scholarship to the University of Oklahoma, and he's got a national championship ring and two Big 12 championship rings, and you know, he's now 6'2", 255 pounds, and he trains as a mixed martial arts performer and plans to fight in Japan, you know, as such. And, he had a very good debut in Japan, and he's, you know, he's been wrestling as a full-time student. He just graduated May 14th. So now that he's able to actually spend the time that becoming a pro wrestler deserves, I mean, once he gets this, he's going to be so talented. He is, you know, at 255 pounds, he's incredibly strong, and very, very quick. So he has, you know, that surge of power. And he's going to be something else. I mean, he's a very, very good amateur wrestler during his youth, and he could have been a collegiate wrestler, a very, very good one. But we decided to have him go as a football player, and that worked out well because, you know, he got a great college education at the University of Oklahoma and a great career. So, and you know what? He's a good-looking kid. He took after his mother. Thank you, Lord. he just a gentleman, very intelligent. He's a college graduate. And
has he got any specific goals for his career, or is he just taking it one step at a time at the moment?
Well, I think we need to make a decision. He's a very young, strong kid, and if he wants to be a wrestler, we need to decide on that. If he wants to be an MMA performer, I want him to take his direction. He loves professional wrestling. He grew up on it. I remember I had came home from the WCW, and I believe I had just received in the mail. I brought home with me some matches of myself and Sting, and I was watching them in the family room. On the, back then it was a VHS, and it wasn't DVD at that time. And, there was a Hulk Hogan doll that Jesse had in his hands, and as I turned the match on, he had power slammed the Hulk Hogan doll, big fluffy doll, and it was like 3 feet long, so it wasn't like the little short plastic ones. And he jumped off the couch and he dropped an elbow on the stall. He was 6 years old, so he's been around it a long time. So, once he's allowed the time, and there's a certain point in the wrestler's career where it clicks. He's not just going to be good; he's going to be extremely good. So we'll have to see.
Excellent stuff. And before we start to wind down the interview now, I just wanted to quickly ask, you briefly returned to the WWE a few years ago. Did you enjoy your return there, or would you like it to have been a longer deal?
No, that was Mr. Laurinaitis. Johnny Laurinaitis and we had worked in All Japan together. We were friends and are friends. He gave me a call and asked me if I'd do him a favor. And I said Mr. Laurinaitis, Johnny, he wrestled under the character of Johnny Ace. I was sick, and I had been sick, and, I wasn't in any type of condition. I looked horrible. But, again, a friend had asked me for a favor, and I went and did it. And had fun. So,
And obviously, in terms of what you're doing nowadays, you mentioned Vader Time Promotions, but what else are you up to nowadays? What else can people find you doing?
Well, I'm a businessman, an entrepreneur. I have a car dealership license in the state of Colorado, buy and sell automobiles. There's a promotional company that I'm starting up here in Denver with some old college roommates, and we're going to run some shows later this year. So I'm pretty busy, to say the least, between the three things, and then training my son. So it's not much rest for the weary.
Well, we realise at this point in time you've got to go because you've got some very important business to attend to, but once again, thank you so much for giving us the time you have given us. We would love to do it again sometime soon.
Jeremy, again, it's a pleasure. You're a gentleman, and I thank you very much.
Thank you once again, and everybody listening, stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Dropkick Radio.